Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, along with Jenna Blum. And I want to say that we're 5 now. We're 5. The baby's growing out. So thank all of you who have been coming to our meetings and participating. And thank all of you who have been buying books and supporting indie bookstores. A few housekeeping things before we get to our very special guest. There's a chat on the right. We love comments. We love questions. Don't be shy. Even if you want to pop in there and say, oh, what a good talk. Or if you want to say, as I did, love your glasses, Clea Simon. You want to do that. Also, so we'll be talking about a half an hour. And then I'm going to say goodbye to all of you and remind you of all this stuff. So today we are talking to Boston Globe best-selling author Clea Simon. She's a native of New York. She came to Massachusetts to attend Harvard and never left. Not Harvard, Massachusetts. She's the author of 3 nonfiction books, 32 mysteries, most recently The Psychological Suspense, The Butterfly Trap, which I have right here, which is a wonderful book. Her books alternate between cozies, usually featuring cats, darker psychological suspense, like the Massachusetts Center for the Book Must Read, Hold Me Down, and World Enough, which are both great, gritty books. She lives with her husband, the writer John S. Garlick, another Boston Globe alum, and their cat, Thisbe, in Somerville, Massachusetts. Another really interesting thing about Clea is I met Clea on the early days of AOL when I was trying to figure out where are all the writers, who am I going to talk to? And we both were on this really weird book site. I think it was me, Clea, and this other woman who was, she was writing very different books than what we were writing. And Clea had just written Fatherless Women. And since I am a fatherless woman, I was really interested in that. And we just became friends. And we see each other every once in a while. And we talk all the time. And I am just so thrilled to have her here. So let me read you some of the stuff for them. First of all, the book is about 2 couples, each with a different story. But who's telling the truth? It's Anya and Greg. They seem to be the golden couple until dark secrets come to light and unleash devastation. It's been called a slow burn, he said, she said, psychological suspense novel. Bookless raves. The theme of fear and control in a relationship emerges in Simon's tense latest, along with the exploration of the many ways 2 people can deceive each other. Book blog of the Bristol Public Library said, shocking. I said, darkly inventive and full of grit and suspense, my favorite kind of book. First Clue Review says, on the surface, this is a he said, she said crime tale, but there's much more going on in this darker departure from Simon's previous work. It's a close examination of what happens when one partner is completely smitten. The reader will be waiting for the yearning to tip over into obsessive stalking, and the other one doesn't believe themselves not right for this love, but not worthy overall. And finally, from Bookless. Oh, I already told you Bookless. Okay, so anyway, welcome, Clea Simon. Welcome for your beautiful book, The Butterfly Trap. It's a great cover. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Caroline. I'm thrilled. And yes, we have been friends for ages. So
forever. And yeah. It's so wonderful when something like that happens and you have someone, another author you can call, you can cry to, you can laugh with. It means everything. It means everything. So The Butterfly Trap is a really gritty, perfect noir with these profound questions about relationships and how the past impacts our present. I hate the question, where do you get your ideas? Because writers never, you're sort of left saying, I don't know, but I like to ask instead, what was haunting you or obsessing you so that you knew you had to write this particular novel?
Well, that's a great way of putting it. What was haunting me? Because it's true. It's the ideas that Caroline and I talk writing a lot, and it is the ideas that haunt us that we feel we have to write. And in my case, it came out of a kitchen table discussion with a friend, a male friend, who was widowed, and he was seeing someone new finally, and it was really clear that it wasn't going to work. And they'd come to stay with us for the weekend. And by the end of the weekend, I mean, my husband and I knew, and I think my friend knew too, that it wasn't going to work, to the point where we were sitting at our kitchen table and we both ended up crying. And I said something to him like, you do know you always go for the crazy, right? That then made me think of my parents' relationship. And my mother, like Anya in the book, was an artist. My mother was a printer and a painter. Anya in The Butterfly Trap is a painter. And my father was an internist. And Greg in the book is, when we meet him, he's a medical researcher, and he switches to a surgical residency. He wants to be a doctor in private practice. He can support Anya in the life he thinks she should be entitled to. But my parents had, and they stayed married till the end of their lives, but they had a sometimes unfortunate dynamic where I'd be sitting at the dining room table with them, and I was the youngest. So this is after the three of us. Just my siblings had left, and my mother would needle my father, just needle and needle and needle, and he'd finally blow up, and she'd run off to the kitchen and cry. And I'd go with her to comfort her because she was crying, and he yelled at her. But even when I was a little kid and comforting my mom, I knew that I felt bad for my father too, and I knew there was something going on there. So it was both sides, and some of that was in the economics of the relationship.
Right.
And he loved that she was an artist, and I do think that still many straight men fetishize or sexualize women artists. Like women artists are sexier and they're more mysterious
because they're wild. They're supposed to be wild. Any kind of woman, they're going to be wild,
and they're in touch with the dark arts or the mystery of life. But so he loved her for that. But at the same time, he was the doctor. He paid the bills. So she had an allowance. She was an adult with an allowance, and she had dinner on the table by 6, no matter what she was working on.
That's, what, my mom had an allowance too. I remember those days. It's like, what a horrible thing. And the interesting thing, my mom always told me, make sure you have a job, make sure you have your own money, make sure you do this. And she's right. I want to talk a little bit more about that, because Greg and Anya both seem to believe that they're the perfect couple. Greg seems shy and sweet, and it doesn't seem like he would ever thwart her ambition as an artist. Their relationship is sort of like a classic love story, except that Anya's hiding something that Greg has to confront. So I wanted to talk about what the perfect couple is, because you and I have talked about this so many times. And the thing is, like, I know John, I've seen you with John. You seem to have just like the perfect, you just complement each other. You have absolutely the perfect relationship.
Like you and Jeff.
So yes, like me and Jeff, actually. Why do people's expectations often color what they actually have? I mean, I've seen people who I think they have a good relationship, but the things they're bitching about are always things like, well, he doesn't read the paper to me, or he doesn't bring me, or like things that you say, like, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. So why do you think our expectations color the truth? Do you think it's our past experiences?
I think it's a combination of things. It's definitely our past experiences. It's, we want the good of what was ever in the past, and we forget what was bad.
Right.
And if we don't get exactly that good plus, then we're in trouble. But also, we are always the heroes or heroines of our own stories.
Right.
We always think, we're right. And, in the case of Greg and Anya, they both have huge blind spots. In Anya's case in particular, it's because of her past. In Greg's, it's partly because he's blinded by his fantasy. It's like he does things for it. Like he buys one of her paintings at a show, and he thinks he's doing a good thing. It turns out not to be. And you have to wonder, even though he thinks he's doing a good thing, is it just that he wants to own her? Does he really want to help her? And, there are all these, we have blind spots. I think
we do.
That's why the expectations are fall off. We expect that what we shouldn't expect, and we don't see both what we really want, or we're not honest about what we really want, and we're not honest about what we're willing to give, about who we are.
That's right. That's right. And we have to ask ourselves these questions. I want to talk a little bit about the relationships with friends and the communities and how they play into the story, um, especially with Anya and her artistic community. Because if you're a creative, you need your community, and how that factors into a relationship, especially if your partner is not a creative.
Yes. Well, to start with, as a writer, friends are a great mirror. They can see things, they can reflect things that may not be apparent right away. And and we as the author can use them. Like at one point, I have the gallery where Anya works, saying, watch out, some men are really attracted to women artists, and you're very femme. So there's that. But yeah, our relationships and our friends help define who we are. I mean, Anya lives in this artist co-op, and I did run this manuscript by a friend who lives in an artist co-op. It was like, is it really? And her take was, yeah, and the truth is, we're really much more jealous of each other.
Okay. Well, okay. I mean, I think any creative is probably, we try to be jealous with love. I say jealous with love.
Jealous with love. I love that.
Jealous with love, because it's of course you do. There's always that initial feeling. If somebody gets something, you think, well, why wasn't it me? And then you realize, well, that's your problem.
Yes.
Like it could be you tomorrow or maybe next year or whatever. But jealousy with love is the way to go.
Jealousy with love. Yeah.
Yep.
It's not a zero-sum game. And on Greg's side, his friendship maybe isn't so healthy. I mean, he's not an alpha male. So he's used to being the wingman to his buddy Pete. In fact, he meets Anya, or he goes to talk to Anya, in large part because he's seen her at a party. He's instantly smitten by her, and he realizes that Pete is going to move in, and that's what propels him to. So our friendships sort of define us, but they also, as a writer, you use them to reflect back parts of the relationship, and they all have takes on it. I mean, a lot of Anya's friends, several of Anya's friends, see the relationship a lot more clearly than she does.
Oh, yeah. But even though they see it a lot more clearly, they also see it through their own lens. Mm-hmm. It's kind of, there's that really weird thing, because so much of this thriller is about fear and control, and often it's insidious and we don't see it. But I think when you're in a relationship, if you're insecure at all, you can go through moments where you feel like, oh, I'm totally confident in my relationship. And then there's always that moment where you start to think, what if there's something I don't know?
What do you mean by that? What's that going on there? The voice in the back of your head.
Yeah, the voice in the back of your head saying, like, what's going on? Or why are you, you have a female friend. What's really going on there? I mean, but that's your baggage. That's not necessarily what's going on in the relationship. And I love that. I love it. So I want to talk about secrets, dark secrets. Everybody has them, but how can we stop our secrets from defining us? Is the answer always to show them the light? Or maybe we just show them the light to ourselves and accept them, rather than maybe sometimes burdening our partner with them? Like, what do you think in the light of your book about that?
Wow. Well, they both have some secrets, don't they?
Yes, they do.
I think they're the best course. If I were this couple's therapist and it was the beginning of the book, I think I would have suggested at least some honesty. Part of the problem is that neither of them really wants to be honest. I mean, right. Greg doesn't want to hear about anything in Anya's past because he just wants to see her as perfect in his.
Right.
Stuff she doesn't want to divulge. And in terms of Greg's secrets are, I think, also largely secret to him. He's a very inarticulate man. Mm-hmm. At times there are references to, I hope I'm not giving much away, but, someone notes some bruises on Anya's arm. And she says, well, he gets frustrated. And it's like, I don't think Greg thinks of himself as ever hurting her.
Right.
There's a side of him that he's not honest with himself about.
Right.
That said, if Anya from the start had been able to break through Greg's reserve and her own reserve, and tell her more about tell him more about her past. I got my pronouns mixed up there. They would have stood more of a chance.
I want to talk more about that whole idea of Greg's wanting her to be on that pedestal and perfect, because I think that tells us so much more about Greg than it does about Anya. Like
Yeah.
why he needs her to be perfect. What is that about?
Yeah. Well, we get some hint of it when we meet his parents just briefly. Um,
Right.
and he notes the strain in the relationship. And so clearly, he did not grow up in an idyllic childhood. It's just, it's referred to. It's not, restated, I hope. So he wants what he's never had, and he wants this ideal. But because he's never lived it or witnessed a perhaps a good, loving, warm, supportive relationship, he only has the
Right.
movie version of it.
That's
And
right.
yeah, and I think so. I think that's where that comes from. He has this idea of what it should be.
You and I used to always talk about patterns in our relationships when we were in our 20s. I think we both dated the same bad boys who were just like horrible and cheating, but very exciting. And, once patterns like that form, it's really hard to break them. I mean, I remember once I started discovering, oh, men could be nice, I would look at them with disdain at first. So, how do you feel that these people can break their patterns, and why don't they? Why don't they? Is it because it's comforting to stay in a pattern?
I think it is hard to give up a dream. And Greg has had this dream for a long
Right.
time. And Anya in part is dealing with a lot of other stuff. Anya's a working artist. And not only has she not had financial success, in fact, she's in debt when we meet her, but also she hasn't had creative success. She spends a lot of her time and her energy. She's trying desperately to create art that's real and true to her. She remembers teachers in art school telling her she had a good color sense, but she's sick of just doing pretty.
Right.
She wants
Right.
to do something that reflects the turmoil within her, the passions within her, and she's having a hard time doing it. So that she's spending more time and energy on that, frankly, than on her relationship with Greg. So that's
Right. Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about your mom, who was an artist, but it was a different time period where, as you said, she had to have dinner on the table. She was also a wife and mother. I want to know, my mother was not, she wanted me to have my own job, and she was sort of supportive of my writing, but she always said, wife and mother come first. The man is more expensive. So I wanted to know, what messages did you receive from your mom, and which did you accept and which did you reject? Excuse me.
Well, some of my fondest memories from my early childhood were playing in her studio. I mean, she would be doing these collages with rice paper or bits of beach glass, and I'd get to play with that stuff. So from her, I did get the sense that creating is beautiful, and also I find in retrospect now a lot of just what I mean. She would drag me around to galleries, not because she thought she was educating me, but because she had to do something with me.
Right, right, right.
I napped in the corners of many galleries, but now I can look at a painting and I'll be talking to John. I'll be going, oh yeah, notice how the composition does this. So there's a lot of stuff that I just sort of absorb. But yeah, I think one of the lessons that I learned from her is that you can cut yourself open and spill your guts on a canvas or a page, but still you have to button it back up and look pretty and keep your weight under control. And I remember my mom drinking Metrical and wearing
Metrical. Oh my God, I forgot about that. There's a change in the. Do you remember the jingle? There's a change in the weather. There's a change in the sea, and with Metrical, there will be a change in the. Yeah, it's so interesting. Did your mother ever have regrets about the way she lived her life?
I think she probably did. We didn't really talk about it.
Yeah.
Towards the end of her life, she was incredibly encouraging of me.
Oh, that's
by
great.
writing, yeah. And the flip side was, my father, he was not an articulate man, and in many ways he was very loving, but he was very blunt. But at one point, he tried to write a book, and it was a nonfiction book. It was about he was a member of the Harvard Wireless Club, which he founded. He was class of 1943, whatever, and it started. I think I hooked him up with, I was working at Harvard Magazine, the alumni magazine. I think I connected him with the editor, and the editor was like, yeah, we can take an article on that. No more than like 3,000 words. And soon he had a 16,000 word thing. And I was like, you have to cut it. He's like, no, this is the whole history. And it turned, and basically it wasn't acceptable. And so he tried to turn it into a book, and he ended up self-publishing it. But it occurred to me that he just assumed that writing a book was something he could do.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I mean, his baby daughter did it, so of course he could do it. Yeah.
I know how that is. I had a sibling who wrote a book, and I edited it, and my sibling did not want to make the changes, and I kept saying, but that's what you do when you write. You like take it apart and put it back together again. Yeah. And my sibling said, no, I have no interest in doing that. And I thought, wow, that's really that's not being a writer. Right. Not being a writer. So I want to ask a question about, especially with Anya and Greg, about who's the victim and who's the perpetrator. Because as somebody who did have an emotionally abusive relationship a long time ago, for a long time I presented the guy as, he was the evil one. He was doing this. He was being terrible. And then I thought, well, I was allowing it. I stayed for 2 years. Why did I stay for 2 years? And you have to sort of dig down and see that. Do you believe that, like in relationships like this, it's a question of who can gaslight whom, or who has more emotional strength?
Certainly in some relationships like that. I mean, I'm thinking of my parallel relationship. As Caroline said, we had we basically dated the same guys.
Yeah, we did.
And the one I'm thinking of, and there were several, but the one I was thinking of, I started seeing right after I found out my father had terminal cancer. So in retrospect, I think I was just looking for stability and maybe a similar male, a smart but perhaps subtly abusive man. And I say that, as I say that, I think of my father with great fondness, but there was still that yelling.
Of course.
So clearly I was getting something out of that relationship.
Yeah. For me, it was the stability. I didn't want to grieve somebody else who had died who I loved. And I figured, well, if I leave this relationship, I'm going to have to grieve. Plus, it was like stability, had a great apartment. It was, in a way, I was responsible too. And I always find that really interesting. You got to be honest with yourself about that. And that took me a while. Okay.
I have to throw in women who are like, severely emotionally and physically abused. That's a whole different case.
That's a whole different thing. Yeah.
Bad situations. But there are cases where the women are totally blameless and they're just being messed with.
Yes, that's right. No way do I want to say that. No way do I want to say that. Absolutely, totally blameless for anyone who is physically abused. Totally blameless for emotional abuse. That's where you're trapped and you're stuck. Terrible. I have utmost sympathy. For me, it was. I had agency. I could have left and I did not. So that was on me. But it's not on anybody else at all. Okay, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so what always amazes me about you is your versatility. You can go from writing a nonfiction book, Fatherless Women, to the relationship about women and their animals, to cozy mysteries, to cat thrillers, to gritty noir thrillers like this one. Do these books serve different needs for you? Do you have to get into a different head when you're writing different books?
Yes. Though there is continuity. Writing the nonfiction book about women and their cats led naturally into the cat cozies and then into the darker cat books because they all had, it was all my relationship with cats, basically. And yeah, they're all aspects of my life, like the darker books, like The Butterfly Trap and like Hold Me Down and World Enough. They all, at least at some level, deal with these artistic subcultures where I have felt at home and supported. So I always bring those in. I know them. And also, writing about Anya, I got to write about the creative process. I mean, she's it's the same thing. It's me trying to break from cozies to, the pretty colors to doing something harder. Though I also love my cozies. And having said that, it is a different headspace. And I find them both really valuable because writing the cozies, especially by now, because I've written so many of them, it's really comforting. I mean, these are supposed to be comforting to read, but it's lovely to write a book where, the villains are bad, but they're not that bad, and they get caught, and everyone is basically okay.
And you have cats.
Yeah, it's like in my Witch Cats, it's like, and the three cats. It's this young woman. The Witch Cat story frame is that the heroine wants to be a witch, but it's really her three cats who have the magical powers. So her cats are always talking about her and trying to help her. Who wouldn't want that? But then, so I do those, and those are they're fun to write. I won't say they're easier because writing is always like pulling out your fingernails, but they're comforting to be. It's comforting to be in that world. But then every now and then I get hit by something like, oh my God, my parents' relationship. It's still active today, and I've dynamic, and I have to write that. So then that takes over.
I want to talk about, we feel for your characters even when they behave badly. So this is a two-part question. The first part is it hard for you to understand them? And also, I hate when readers call characters unlikable, because my feeling about that is that characters don't have to be unlikable. We just have to understand why they do what they do. And you have said you just have to believe them, that they're real people. So can you talk about that for a little bit?
Oh, I'd love to. I hate when people call people unlikable, especially people have been saying that, I think particularly Anya is unlikable. And it's like, no, she's a contemporary woman working her ass off, trying to make her art, trying to pay her rent, trying to manage her relationship with her boyfriend, who's always wanting more and more and more. She's balancing everything. I mean, I've been her. We've all been her.
We've all been unlikable, quote unquote, but you understand it.
That's the hope. And yeah, in terms of, when I write them, I love them. Even Greg, inarticulate bull in a china shop, Greg, I feel for him. I know what he wants. I know that yearning. He's just unable to express it in a useful.
Mm-hmm. We have a wonderful comment from Clea's husband, John Ehrlich. John, hi. Tony Soprano had to strangle that guy. He was a rat. That's
exactly.
Right. That's his code. That's his moral code. He had to do that. He was quoting you, Clea.
Well, yeah, you get into the character's head.
It's your interest. It's the moral code. It's like villains do not think they're villains. No. Tony Soprano would it was his job. He would go to work and think, oh, that guy was a rat, so I have to strangle him. And I have to do that to protect my family, who I love. And also, John noted, we loved him. We love him. We do love him, and we love him because he loves his mom. He has other qualities, He loves his mom. He loves his family. He wants to protect his family. That's what we do with these people. We're fascinating. Nobody is all bad or all good.
Yes.
Okay, so I have one last question for you, which is this quote that you have, which I absolutely love, which is, we write to understand what we think. I love it, love it, love it. Tell us about that quote.
Thank you. I think that I stole that from someone, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry if whoever wrote that. Thank you so much.
But
my error.
But it's certainly true. I think this must be true for you as well. Like, I had this situation between these two people, and I didn't understand necessarily how it worked. But as you write, especially if you're writing interaction between two people, and it's like your ear tells you what's true. Like, you don't have one character saying, "Oh, Anya, you're not being fair to me."
Right?
No, Greg wouldn't say that.
They wouldn't say that, right? They'd talk about something else.
Figure out what people would say to each other, and by watching that happen. And I say watching as if it, I'm typing it, but
right, you're
going, no, that doesn't work. Anya would never say, "Greg, I have something to tell you." It just, it wouldn't work like that. So as you watch these characters interact, you learn about them. So again, that's sort of just true for the butterfly trap. But in general, I write, and perhaps we all write. We write about things that interest us.
Mm-hmm.
That perhaps obsess us.
That's right.
But that we don't understand. There's always like, what's going on here? What is this about? And so we write it out, because if you write it out, you see how it plays out. It's almost like taking a knotted ball of yarn and picking out the threads, and you go, oh, I see. And that's how I know what I think of something. And
That's right.
nonfiction as well.
That's right. I've often heard say that a lot of times you don't know what you're really writing about until you've finished it. And then you realize, oh my God, that's what I really needed to do. And a lot of times also when you're trying to write and you don't want to write about something, that's what you should write about. That's what you should write about.
Yes, definitely. You go for the heat. You go for
You go for the
yeah.
You go for that. You go
Well,
for that.
it's like with Butterfly Trap. When we're pitching this, I was thinking, oh, it's about gender roles and da-da. It's not. It's really about desire,
and control.
Yeah, desire and control, or expectations and control.
That's right.
And yeah, how those interact, how they conflict, and how they change each other.
That's right. That's right. So I want to show you this gorgeous book again, The Butterfly Trap. And I want to tell everybody that I've made it really easy for you to order, because if you look in the chat, all you have to do is click on Bookshop or walk into your favorite indie, order copies for your friends. It's a wonderful book. It's pretty. Also, it's set in Boston, where I grew up. And Boston is a great backdrop for books, and Clea's used it in many books. So I want to thank everybody who came here and who gave comments and asked questions. I want to remind you that this is recorded. It's going to be on the Mighty Blaze YouTube station, so you can tell other people to watch. We have a lot of people watching after the fact. So I will see everybody next week. And Clea, you stay on so I can thank you profusely. And we'll see all of you next time. Bye.
Bye.